Hello, and welcome to the Defend stage, Threat Management 12.7 release kickoff. I'm Matt Wilson. I am the new and going forward, going to be the permanent product manager for the Threat Management group. So let's talk about what we've got upcoming for 12.7. So we can see it looks like there's only one thing on the board right here, but there are actually two things. We'll get to that in a second. So we are breaking out our issues into more granular, these group scope labels. So this now falls under the threat management, and the category specifically we're talking about right here is vulnerability management. So let's look at the thing that's not on the board. So we've had this in flight for a while now. It missed the 12.5 release, unfortunately, and we weren't able to finish it in 12.6. This is another large project that, even though it's an MVC, there's a lot of moving parts to it. What this is, the standalone vulnerability objects, is it's really taking the concept of what you see today if you're dealing with vulnerabilities as results from our scanners, like our SAST scanner or DAST scanner, and it's elevating that to a first-class object. Now, what that really means is we're going to be treating these kind of like you would treat, let's say, an issue today. So it's something that can be uniquely linked and have a standalone URL, be interacted with, provide comments. Now, it's not going to change a whole lot functionally for end users, but what it's going to allow is a lot more power and flexibility going forward and how we actually manage our, well, findings. So these are things picked up by a scanner that could be an indicator that there was a vulnerability detection, and then ultimately how you deal with these and track these. So this is kind of a cornerstone piece of work that's going to be replacing a lot of what we've got in flight today that backs the security dashboards, the pipeline, and the MR security widget. So this work is going to continue into 12.7, which we hope to wrap that up, and then we'll actually start migrating some of the pieces that I just mentioned over onto this new architecture. So a lot of this is behind the scenes, but expect to hear more about this in the coming releases. Now, the other item that we're targeting for 12.7 is kind of sits on top of this. So when I mentioned that the standalone vulnerability object is going to be sort of the underpinnings of a lot of features we want to build going forward, this is a good example of that. So we want people to be able to create what we're calling system notes when they're interacting with a vulnerability. So traceability and history is very important when you're trying to look at the life cycle of a given vulnerability. It can be useful not just for the engineering teams, the individual developers, or your DevOps teams, or your DevSecOps teams. It can also be useful for your internal security teams or even your auditors, making sure that they can tell exactly what happened with a vulnerability, if it was closed and for what reason, was it resolved, etc. So this is pretty straightforward, but basically, when a user creates an issue from a vulnerability to address it in some way, we're going to offer state changes. So right now, what we're proposing is it starts in an open state or an unactioned state, and then the user can actually move it to a confirmed state, indicating that it was actually a vulnerability, not a false positive. And the user can also, once from the confirmed state, can also resolve it once a corrective action has taken place. And of course, you can also reverse these decisions as well, backing it up to previous states. It's pretty straightforward. This is just what the user-generated system note design proposal will look like. So you'll see simply when you are changing states from one to another, you will see an indication of the user's full name from their GitLab profile, their GitLab handle, followed by the change of a vulnerability status to whatever it was, and then the timestamp behind it. So pretty straightforward, again, depending on the work for standalone vulnerability objects, but this is just one step in the right direction to providing that additional accountability, traceability, and then ultimately auditability of all the vulnerability findings inside the system. And that is what we've got scheduled the major feature items for the 12.7 release for the threat management group in Defend. Thank you once again, and we'll talk soon.